Hey everybody, welcome back. In this project video, we're going to make a saddle rifle scabbard. If you follow us on Instagram, you've probably seen us make a few of these over the last couple of years. It's not an item that we've ever made a lot of in the shop, but occasionally we get somebody that requests one, mainly just because of where we are. In Texas, a lot of people don't pack in horseback to hunt or anything like that, so these are more unique items, and we're going to come at this from just a leather working perspective here. There's people out there that you can get in contact with for way more information, good information on actually packing in and carrying a rifle on a saddle. We don't have a whole lot of experience with that. I'm just going to come at this from a leather working perspective on how I would approach making one of these. So we designed a pattern that I like, that I can kind of consider my own. I tightened it up a little bit to where the gun is actually a little more secure in here, and we added this flap here on the stock end that just kind of securely holds that weapon in here so that it doesn't fall out. It's a really unique item, makes a great gift, just something cool even if you just want to have it in the house or something, just for display or something like that. Makes a really neat item. They're not hard to build, as you'll see. It's not very difficult at all. It just takes a lot of leather because it is so large. So we're going to go ahead and hop right into the video right now and get started and show you how to make one of these. Alright, so here I've got a side of 910 that I held back. It had some blemishes on it, so I didn't use it for belts. I saved it for something like this. So we're going to go ahead and position that in the best spot there. Unfortunately, it's kind of towards the middle there. But then we will cut out all the pieces, the main body piece, which you see me tracing off there, and we'll go ahead and mark where the flap's going to get sewn in, as well as our bag punch for our little D, and then we will also cut out the flap as well. Alright, so here we're going to go ahead and cut out the strap loops, and they're just a little piece of leather there that we rounded off the ends on, and I'm cutting this out of a backline piece off of a side of leather. I save all of those when I straight edge a side or cut anything long out of there. I save those backlines because they're really handy for little bitty pieces like this, because it's good quality leather. So you want something nice and firm that's good, that's not going to stretch out too much. Alright, and here I've got a piece of latigo here, a side of latigo. I'm going to go ahead and strip off my material for the straps. I'm going to strip these off, and then you'll see me in a minute. I'm going to pull those down on the splitter to around 5/6 ounce. You don't want those straps too bulky, but you want them nice and firm. So that's why I'm just going to go ahead and use latigo. You could certainly use veg tan here or even harness leather. Just a good weight's going to be around that 6 ounce weight. It'll be perfect for those. 1 inch wide and approximately 36 inches long. And here's all our pieces. So we've got a couple straps. I've also got a little piece of latigo there for our little buckle straps, and then all of our strap loops and the flap. We'll go ahead and get all that laid out right here, and then we will prep the body of the rifle scabbard for tooling. And we're just going to tape up where we actually are going to put tooling, so and that way just those areas don't stretch too much. And so here I'm going to go ahead and put in a acorn oak leaf tooling pattern on this particular scabbard that I'm making, and we'll go ahead and show a little bit of the tooling here. I'm not going to show it all as usual, but we'll go ahead and show some of the design work and some of the tooling on this. Alright, this piece was supposed to be done whenever we cut this piece out, but what you want to do is punch a number 8 hole right there where the tip of the scabbard comes together. That'll be a lot easier to cut that out, and you want a little bit of space in there, and that number 8 hole works well for that. So when you cut that out, just punch a hole right there and then cut to that hole, and that'll get that end nice and cleaned up. All right, and here's our pieces that have been tooled. They've had a chance to dry, so now we'll go ahead and pull that tape off of there. You know, to get all that off, since we're not lining this scabbard here, if you were lining it, you could certainly do poster board or just go ahead and line it and then tool it, however you wanted to do it. But we went ahead and used tape just to kind of keep that from stretching if it did want to stretch. So first thing is first, we're going to go ahead and sand, edge, and slick all the areas that we need to on this project before we start putting things together. So that'll mean the opening end of the rifle scabbard. We will not worry about any of the rest of it, as we'll sand and slick that once we get it sewn. But we'll go ahead and sand that down, just make sure we got a nice clean edge, and then we'll edge it. We'll do the same to the strap loops here. I'll go ahead and sand and edge and slick all of those, as well as the flap. We'll go ahead and get that done as well. That way all of those pieces are done and they're ready to be put on the actual scabbard. All right, so while we wait on those edges to dry so that we can dye them before we start assembly, we're gonna go ahead and get our straps made. So I'm just gonna dock the ends of the straps here with just an English point tip here on the punch bench, and then we will get all of those edged and ready to go ahead and put the buckles in and get those ready to go. Okay, so here's our material for our keepers. We're going to want to make leather keepers for these straps just to keep the straps tight around the scabbard. And so we've got a little 3/4 inch piece of latigo here, and we're just going to go ahead and edge this. I'm backing that against that ruler that's screwed down to the bench there. That just helps to hold that strap in place while you edge it. We've done a video on some tip video on how to edge little strips of leather and things, and you can go back and watch that, but that's what that's for. We'll go ahead and get that material prepped up and edged. I'm not going to bother slicking any of this stuff. The latigo's pretty good. Once you put tan coat on it, you can slick it, but we'll go ahead and fold that strap in half so we can get a distance here on how big we need to make these loops. And so I just use the material they're going to go around, and then I wrap it around there, mark center of where those two need to be right there, and we'll go ahead and cut. Sometimes I'll cut that a little bit short just so that loop's nice and tight on the strap and it's not going to waller around. And then we'll cut that to length, and then we'll cut a second one. We need one for each strap, and then we'll begin to sew those together. So I'm just taking a head knife and cutting that off. We'll cut this one to length as well. So now this is how I make the loops. I just take an awl and just make 2 holes, one on each side at the end. So you have 2 holes on each end of the little strap, and then we'll take some heavy cord. I'm using a tiger thread, a natural colored braided tiger thread in probably a 1.0 size, and we'll go ahead and lace a X lace or a box lace on the back here. I think it looks good. And it holds them much better than like a staple would. If you've got the good heavy brass harness style staples, those work well also, but I just prefer to use the thread. I think it works a little bit better and looks a little nicer. So as you can see right there, there's our X lace or a box lace, whatever you want to call that, and we just kind of tie that in a knot. I do a double knot there and then just tie it down real tight and cut that and burn it on the inside. That way you don't see it on the outside of the loop, since they will be exposed. And then we'll go ahead and get the other one done. So our edges have dried, had time to dry here on our pieces, and so we're just going to go ahead and take a dye pen here with some Pro Oil dye, just dark brown, and I'm just going to dye those edges. You certainly don't have to dye them if you don't want to. As we've said before on other things, if you don't like dyeing edges, don't do it. A nice, shiny, slicked edge, just in a natural finish, looks very nice as well. So we're just going to go ahead and dye. I'm going to dye all these and get those ready so that we can start putting this together. Okay, so on our flap, what we're going to want to do is, on this pattern, I use a 3/4 inch D, so we need a 1 inch hole. Bag punch there at the bottom, that's going to allow enough room for that D to fit up inside there, the actual D to go through that slot, and then we'll do a 3/4 inch slot above that, and that's where our little strap will rivet in place. Now I like to take a number 3 or a number 4 edger. This is a round Ron's edger. And I like to edge the inside of those slots. It just makes them a lot more user-friendly and kind of opens them up from the backside just a little bit more, and allows them to lay a little nicer. You certainly don't have to do that. I'm going to get the back end of the flap just a little wet there with the water bottle, and that way I can thin down the area where we're going to sew. Now you don't want to take this to a feathered edge. We just want to edge it just a little bit. Skive it just a little bit. Maybe take a half of the thickness off. We just want a little bit there so that it's not quite as bulky and lays a little flatter, but don't go all the way down to a feathered edge. I'll show you here in a second how much I took off, but it's not a ton. It's just about half the thickness of that 9/10 ounce piece of leather, and it's just in the area where we're going to sew. Now right here, I'm going to go ahead and just put a mark at about a 1/2 inch from the edge. And so what we're going to do is we're going to sew a long rectangle, basically, just two lines of stitches, about a 1/2 inch from the edge, and that will sew it in place on the actual scabbard. Now on these little strap loops, I have some marks on the pattern that show you where to stitch, but it's basically, I think they're about 3.5 inches long, and you sew about 1 inch on each side. And so we're going to go ahead and just groove that. You don't have to groove it, but I like to groove them, and we'll just sew 2 U's, one on each side. That's going to leave the opening in the middle for that strap to pass through there. So we'll get all these grooved, and then we'll be ready to glue those onto the actual body of the scabbard. Now this material here is just another little piece of that 3/4 inch latigo, and we're going to go ahead and cut that for our little loop strap. And I'll just end point that once I get it cut to length. I'll just do a little round end point on both ends, and then we'll rivet that in place into the flap, and that'll be ready to go. So now we'll take our little strap loops. I'm just laying these out here just kind of show you where they go. The pattern has it marked on where they need to go. We'll go ahead and get some glue out, and we're just going to put a little bit of glue on each end of these little strap loops. And the easiest way to do this without getting glue everywhere is to put you a good amount of glue on each end, just a little dollop there on each corner. Just need it to hold down while we sew it. That's all we're looking for. So just put your little glue there, and then immediately line it up on the marks where it goes, and just press it down. We'll call that thumbing it down. Just kind of press it down and then pick it up, and it transfers glue exactly where you need it. You don't have to try to get in there with a brush. And I use that technique on a lot of applications just because it's much easier than trying to brush stroke some of that glue on there and chance dripping some on the actual body of there. We'll get those glued in place, and we'll go ahead and sew those on the sewing machine. Alright, so as I sew this, you might see me just go ahead and jump over to the other end of that little strap loop without cutting my thread off. That's just saving you a little bit of time and keeping you from having to pull the work in and out of the machine. And then we can trim those ends once we get done sewing. Doesn't hurt anything, and it just kind of, like I said, saves you a little bit of time. So now we'll get all our threads cut here, and as you can see, we just kind of jumped across to that other end, so we might need to get a little awl or something and pick that thread up. It's kind of tight right there, and just trim all those off, and then we'll be ready to go ahead and finish assembly. Alright, so now we're going to put our bag punch or our slot here, and as well as a number 4 hole there, number 5 hole, whichever one you want to use for the rivet, and that will be where our D goes. And we'll go ahead and take our little 3/4 inch D and make the hanger for that, which is just a piece of 3/4 ounce scrap leather, just 3/4 of an inch wide, same size as the D. I like to skive that in just to kind of make it a little flatter in there, and then we'll put some glue on that and glue it around the D, and we'll be ready to install that. Now when you go to install this D, you'll want to naturally put the rivet facing towards the inside so the pretty side of the rivet is out. But what I would suggest is facing it to the outside where the burr is on the outside. The reason for that is because I don't like the burr facing towards the gun because it could scratch the stock, something like that. It's just kind of anytime I've got any kind of rivet or anything that's going to be interior to something that we're sliding into a case or something, I always like to have the rivets facing outward. I know it's counterintuitive because it's the ugly side of the rivet, but I just think it's a better way to do that so you don't chance scratching the gun with that burr side. Alright, so we're ready to sew our flap on. So what I'm going to do, there's already marks on the pattern for where that flap goes. I'm just setting it down and I'm going to draw a line with my pencil so I know for sure where it's going. I can see it clearly, and I'll just put a little bit of glue along the back edge of the flap as well as on the scabbard, and we'll be ready to sew that in place. Once that glue dries, we can glue it down. Alright, so our flap's in place right there. We've got it sewn in place, and now what we want to do is we want to go ahead and mark where our glue is going to go or where it's going to stop. as it approaches the opening of the scabbard. So what I want to do is mark that. I've got it marked on the outside of the pattern, but now I want to mark it on the inside as well. And so as we're applying glue, we know not to go past that, and you'll have a mark on each side that will line those up when we fold this in half after we put glue. Once we do that, we'll go ahead and flip it over and we'll apply glue all the way around the edge of this scabbard. All right, so here I did notice that I missed a spot or missed a step there. You want to take this 9/10 ounce leather just right there at that fold towards the tail end of this thing. You're going to want to take just a little bit of leather off with a skiver. You don't have to take a lot off. Don't take too much. You just want to take a little bit off so that it'll fold right there on that end. It's a pretty tight area, and we want that to fold over nicely. And as you'll see when we get ready, we're going to go ahead and add a little water to that area too, so that it'll fold nicely and glue down well for sewing. So you want to go ahead and take a little bit off there, and then you can do that at any time, but just do that and before you put glue on there. All right, so our glue has had a chance to set up. So like I said a minute ago, we're going to go ahead and add just a little bit of water right there on the end. You don't have to saturate it. We just want a little bit of moisture there so that leather folds over really nice when we fold this in half. But our glue is nice and tacky. I did do 2 coats of glue, so I always advise doing that, especially on something like this, so it'll stay glued down well. And we'll start bending it. Just kind of take your time. You don't have to wet the whole scabbard to get this bent around here. But I like to start on this end and at least get those 2 marks lined up and get that end kind of tacked down, and then we'll go to the other end and kind of tack it down and then work our way towards the middle. The thing you want to be careful about is that this thing folds in half evenly, and the scabbard is nice and straight. It doesn't have a twist in it. If you glue it up kind of crooked, it'll end up having a curve in it or a twist in it. You just want to be sure that it folds evenly. And so now we'll get this end over here, and you can see how, you know, that area right there is a little tighter because it's not quite as wide. And so we just want to be sure and get a good contact there where that folds over, and then we can work our way towards the middle, aligning our edges, and everything should line up just right. There shouldn't be any discrepancy there. You just want to line it up where it's even, and then we'll groove it and we'll be ready to sew it on the machine. So now before we sew this one, since we did wet down that end there, I'm going to go ahead and put that in front of a fan and give it some time to dry. If you don't, the machine will mark it up really bad. So that's had a good chance to dry, so now we'll go ahead and start stitching. You could definitely sew this with a double row stitching if you would prefer. I've done a couple of them that way and they look really nice, but on this one we're just going to do a single row. And so I'll back up one, and I'll go again, and we'll go all the way around. These things aren't hard to sew, they're just bulky, so you'll have to be sure and set your stool at your machine kind of where you can get around and still see your groove or your line, whatever you're using, and just kind of help guide it through. It's not super heavy, but it's just kind of in the way as you're trying to watch your needle. So they can be a little tricky to sew, but they're not hard. I ran out of, or I had a skip stitch right there, and I had to go ahead and stop and back up a little bit. I had one that missed, and sometimes that happens when you're sewing up things. A lot of that comes into quality material prepping. If your work's not prepped just right in that area we skived, I might have had a little bump there or something, a little change in thickness, and that's what caused that machine to kind of bobble that stitch right there. But we got it fixed up and it sewed the rest perfectly, so not a problem at all. Now as I get to the end here, I'm going to stop at my mark, and then you would think you just stop and then back stitch 2 or 3 times. What I like to do is go ahead and come over one and then turn it all the way around and come back up right beside those stitches to where I've almost got a little section there of double row stitching. And I kind of did, I think I did 4 or 5 stitches, something like that. But I like to come in right there because that's going to be a high traffic area right there at that opening of the scabbard. And so I want to have it nice and strong. I don't want it to be on an end stitch. So we kind of make a corner there, or a U, and it's got a little section there of double row. And I think that makes it a lot more functional and just going to hold up a lot better over time. And now, of course, we're on our big sander here. We're just going to go ahead and sand this edge. Be very careful when you're sanding these if you are using a sanding machine, because you can really take off a lot of material really quickly, and that thing's big, and so it's hard to really kind of know where you are on the edge because it's so large, and you can kind of get at an angle really easy and kind of get into your stitches. So just be real careful. You can also do this with just a sanding block. But now that we've got that sanded up, now we'll go ahead and edge this. I'm edging this with a number 4 round edger, and I stitched inside. My stitch placement was actually inside just a little bit so I can get a nice rounded edge right there, and I can really take off some material, and that's going to give us a really nice clean edge when we go ahead and slick that. So now we're just going to slick this as we do on all of our projects. We do have video on slicking edges if you'd like to go back and watch that, but we're just using glycerin, water, and a canvas rag there, and that's all we're doing. I do use a rub stick a little bit just because it's a heavier edge, and that just kind of helps get it kind of slicked down right there at first, and does a neat job. Now once again, we've let our edges dry. This sat around for probably an hour or two, and the edges are nice and dry, so now we're going to go ahead and go back with our dye pen again with the Pro Oil dark brown dye in there and just dye those edges. Again, these look really good if you don't dye the edges and do a real nice job on your slicking. The natural edge looks really good, especially on gun leather. So, but on this one I decided to go ahead and dye it. So now we're here at the oil bench. We've given our edges a chance to dry, and so now I'm just going to oil this. I went really heavy with oil on this. If you're trying to go for a really light oil on one of these, then I would suggest trying to go as minimal as possible and work your way up so you don't go past where you want to be. The thing you got to remember when you're oiling something particularly tooled like this is that slick area is going to stay lighter, and those tooled areas are going to get much darker quicker. So you want to be very careful how much oil you put in those tooled areas if you're going for a light color on the finish work. You'll want to start really, really light and work your way up, because that tooled area is opened up, the pores are open more, it's going to take oil a lot faster. But we went ahead and went dark on here, so I just started lathering oil on here, and I put a bunch on here over the day, just kind of off and on, going back over there and adding some. I do oil the inside of the scabbard as far as I can reach in, just to go ahead and get some oil in there, but that's up to you whether you decide to do that or not. And you can see here the kind of color that we're getting now. Again, I'm not scared of getting it too dark, because I'm wanting this one to be fairly dark. And I also get a lot of questions on what oil. We've talked about it before in many of our videos, but all that is olive oil. That's all I use. You can certainly use neat's foot oil, peanut oil, even vegetable oil. You can use whatever you prefer, but I use olive oil. That's the oil that I use in the shop. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and antique this as well, and so I'm going to go ahead and resist this with some tan coat. I'm just going over it with tan coat. We're going to do the whole thing, not the inside obviously, but we'll go ahead and put tan coat on here and then let that dry, and we'll come back and antique. If you want to see our antiquing process, you can certainly find a video on that, on the full process, but we're going to go ahead and get this scabbard antiqued right quick. All right, all the finish work is done. So all we've got to do now is just put our straps in. The way we're going to put them in would be depending on how you're going to orient this rifle scabbard on a saddle, if you are going to put it on a saddle. But we're going to go ahead and do it just like this, where the butt of the gun is towards the butt of the horse. And so what we'll do is just run that strap through there, leave our keeper on the buckle side, and then we'll bring that strap up through the keeper on the strap loop on the other side, and run that through that keeper. That's going to keep it tight against the scabbard as it's being used. So as you can see here, that keeper's kind of tight. I usually, like I said, I cut them a little short, and that way they are tight. I don't want them real loose, just traveling up and down the strap. They're going to loosen over time, but I want it fairly snug so that whenever we pull that strap through there, it's going to keep the strap tight against the scabbard. So you want to run that through there and keep that buckle as low towards the scabbard as possible, and your strap should run up and back around there. All right, there she is with her straps on. That's how they should kind of look there, with those keepers close to the body of the scabbard. And now here we'll go ahead and pull that D through that loop and just drop our little strap through there. And that is a very simple closure, very secure. Not a lot can go wrong there, and it's easy to fix if anything did break or tear on it. Alright guys, so that's our version of a saddle scabbard. As you can see, it doesn't take a whole lot. There's not a lot of difficulty in putting this together. You could certainly hand sew this. It's not that much hand sewn, it's less than a belt, but it goes together well. I will say that depending on the orientation, if you are going to use this on a saddle or something, depending on which way you're going to orient that on your saddle or put it on your saddle would determine how you make this. So if you look at it, you know, if you're going to be on the way this one's designed right here is this one is designed to be on the off side or the right side of the horse with the stock towards the tail end, and so that's just the way this orientation is. If you wanted it towards the front, which I've seen some people carry them that way, or I've seen some articles and stuff on the proper way to carry them, and some people like them towards the front or the stock end towards the head of the horse, then you could do it that way as well. Or if you want it this direction here, you'll have to make it in reverse. So that's really the only thing, but the way the pattern is set up is that you can just flip it over and make it in reverse depending on how you're going to orient it. I've made these a lot in the past just for guys to carry like a truck gun in there, you know, just something that they have behind the seat of the pickup or on the floorboard or something, but they put it in here just so that it doesn't get bumped around and scratched and things like that. I've also sold these just because people want something cool to hang in their house, to hold, you know, grandpa's old 30-30 or something like that. So like I said, they're great little gift items, and like I said, you can reach out to outfitters and things like that that know way more about packing in, carrying these kind of things on horseback and that kind of deal. We're just coming at it from a leather worker's perspective. But we do have a pattern pack for this, and it has 6 different tooling patterns. This is one of them that's available in the pattern pack. It's got 6 different tooling patterns available in there. We're offering that in a printed as well as a digital version for our folks that are overseas or out of the country that would like to get that. It is a large format print, so the size of the paper is 3 foot by 4 foot, so you'll have to take that somewhere and have it printed. If you want us to mail you a printed copy and you're in the United States, then we can go ahead and just mail that out to you. It'll already be printed. Then you'll want to be sure and click the link down in the description for the printed copy versus the digital. The digital copy will be a download that you'll have to carry somewhere and have somebody print that out for you since it's so large. But I'm happy with the pattern pack. I think it came out really well. And like I said, there's 6 different tooling patterns. There's a couple of them that come in more towards the center. I don't have any that are just fully tooled front and back, just because this is pushing some of the most tooling that you'll ever do on a project. It's getting close to rope bag size if you're tooling one side of a rope bag, as far as just the amount of tooling. So we kind of kept it easy and kept it just this end and this end, since most of the time you're going to have your saddle fender over this middle section anyway, so you're not going to see a lot of that tooling. But it's a good pattern pack. If you'd like to make one of these and you're interested in getting the patterns for this, the links are down in the description, and you can go ahead and grab that, and it'll take you right there, and you can purchase that and you'll be on your way. I appreciate you guys watching, and we'll see you all in the next project video.